It's Paul here from My Perfect Failure, helping you turn failures into successes. So, how does a woman raised in a secluded religious community with little or no contact with the outside world go on to conquer Wall Street? So, in this episode of My Perfect Failure, Patricia Walsh Chadwick shares her unique story and path to freedom and success. So curious how Patricia turned her challenges into triumphs, then stick around to find out more.
Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore, and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome, everybody. Today I'm super excited because I have another amazing guest for you. So, my guest today received her BA in economics from Boston University and had a successful 30-year career in the investment business, culminating as a global partner at Invesco. Today, she sits on a number of corporate boards and blogs on economics, social and political issues. She's also the author of a number of books, including her new book, Breaking Glass: Tales from the Witch of Wall Street. So a very warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, Patricia Walsh Chadwick. How are you, Patricia?
I'm very well, thank you.
So that was a very contained bio. So on the show notes, we'll give people a little bit more. Otherwise, we would be here for 40 minutes talking about everything you've done in terms of your achievements going through your bio. So I just thought I'd give people a flavour of who you are. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Me too.
So your background is a remarkable one, a remarkable journey. I'm not surprised you're an author because I guess there's any number of books that you could write and potentially will write in the future. Where I'd like to start, if I may, is kind of like the beginning. I mentioned about your corporate career, 30-year corporate career, but before you had the corporate career, there was a pretty significant background and some challenges and some life experiences that you've been through. So maybe we can start at the beginning of your childhood and maybe what that was like as an experience for you.
Yes. Would you like me to basically tell the story?
Yeah, I think it would be lovely for people to capture a bit of the story. We don't have to, I know that some people may be familiar with that, but I think it would be wonderful to give people a bit of context, because I think it's remarkable that you've had this phenomenal business career, yet probably at the age of 17 and younger, you probably wouldn't have thought you'd have had the business career that you did, or did you?
No, I did not. When I was about 8 years old, there were two things I thought I might want to be. One was a cowgirl, and the other was an opera star. And I didn't become either of those, but they're kind of show business in a way.
Yeah.
But I was
never too late. You never know.
I think it may be too late now.
Well,
Though I have done a lot of singing in choral groups and things like that. And I did ride horses. So, but I was born into a religious community. And this was in Massachusetts. And for your audience, that's in New England. And it was really in the town of Cambridge in Massachusetts, not obviously in England. And this religious community was founded, and I was born in 1948, and this religious community was founded so that Catholic students from Harvard and Radcliffe could meet and get together. And it became very, very successful in the 1940s, so much so that the woman who founded it requested permission from the Jesuits to let a very renowned Catholic priest named Father Leonard Feeney come and be the chaplain. And after the World War II, the GI Bill, which was a government-issued bill helping a lot of people who had been in the military to get their college educations, sent many, many, many young men and women to Harvard, to Radcliffe, to Boston College, to lots of places. My father had fought the entire war as a naval officer, and he had already gone to college and was a teacher, and he was at Boston College getting his graduate degree in philosophy. My mother was quite a bit younger, 12 years younger, and she had grown up in Cambridge and had decided she wanted to be Catholic. She was raised Episcopalian, and she wanted to be Catholic. And my parents met at this wonderful, Catholic center in March of 1947. They were married in September of 47 by Father Feeney, and I came along 11 months after that. It all sounds wonderful, but there was a but. At some point after the war, Father Feeney took a very strident and doctrinaire interpretation of one of the dogmas of the Catholic faith. And every religion has its own set of dogmas. And in the Catholic Church, as in many religions, actually, the belief is if you don't belong to this religion, you cannot get to heaven. And in the Catholic Church, there is a dogma that says outside the Catholic Church, there is no salvation. But right after the war, the Archbishop of Boston was trying to get an ecumenical environment. And he kept saying to Father Feeney, no, don't talk about that. That's where we're trying to make friends with Jews and Protestants and everyone. But he would not. And my father supported him. And my mother, who was a brand new convert to Catholicism, she felt very strongly about being Catholic. So she supported him. And then there was a small group. Father Feeney had been so popular that 200, 300 students would try to come and hear him. But after a while, when he became so vitriolic about being Catholic in order to be saved, a lot of those students left. But there was a small cadre of young men and women, highly educated. Some of them were married, some of them were single. And in early 1949, they banded together and founded a religious order. And I was one of the very few children. In a matter of a few years, those 12 married couples, 60 men and women in total, had 39 children. And about that time was when at the Rome, the Pope basically excommunicated Father Feeney. So now we were outside of the church and at war with everyone. And we turned into a religious community. And I didn't care about any of that as long as I was the oldest. And in 6 years, there were 5 of us. So uncle community meals all together. But at night, I had my own apartment. And then one day when I was 6 years old, something happened. And all the children who were 3 or older were separated from their parents. And we were put into one of the apartments and in a dormitory style existence, which was managed by one person. So parental care was destroyed. And shortly after that, Father Feeney pressured the married couples to take vows of celibacy. And my parents at first said, absolutely not. Father Feeney continued to pressure them and eventually said to them, you are the only couple that has refused. Of the 12 couples, you're the only one who has refused. So my parents felt, well, they're going to kick us out if we don't. And so they agreed. I would find out many years later that one of the other children, who was about my age, his father told him that Father Feeney did the same thing to him. So there was this kind of divide and conquer, a manipulation of people, telling them of all things as Catholics to give up their marital vows and take vows of celibacy, to which they hadn't been called at all.
Can I ask a question around that?
Surely.
And maybe this has never been established. What was the logic behind that? Was it maybe a power move to get people to do what he felt was the right thing to do? Was there ever any sense of, this is why I want you guys to do this? Because it all seems, to somebody outside the system, it obviously feels quite, not quite extreme, incredibly extreme.
My parents do not know. Many of the parents do not know. And I think that's divide and conquer.
Okay.
People have guessed. Was it because we were now up to 39 children and maybe we would be up to 69 children or 79 children? And could they afford it? that was some logic. There were other people in the community who said, I feel hypocritical. I'm wearing a nun's garb and I'm walking around pregnant. And so, but there has never been one clear, and it was certainly never spoken. It was manipulated for the people. And so by the time I was 9 years old or so, we left Cambridge and we moved up to the countryside, 30 miles west of Boston. And that's when our life truly became monastic. And we could not speak at all. We never could speak to our parents. We only got to see our parents once about every 3 or 4 months. And when I say see them, I mean see them to engage with them. I saw them every single day in the chapel, at meals, but we weren't allowed to talk to each other. And eventually, once we were up there, it's very interesting. If someone reads my first book, I'm just going to make a little aside. I never used the word cult in that book. And when I wrote that book, which was only 5 years ago, I was reluctant to use the word cult because to me, it was my home. And for me to think that my home was a cult, I couldn't even put the two together. I was coming out in a way that I had never done before. My entire Wall Street career, no one knew my background. And I did a very, very, very good job of hiding it. So there I was, now a 9-year-old, 10-year-old. We were schooled entirely within our own community. We very seldom left the property. We had no access to newspapers or radio or television. And we were being reared to become religious ourselves. And we were told that we were the luckiest 39 children in the world because we had been dedicated to God from our infancy. And I used to think, I don't want to be a nun. And my little dream as a 7 and then 10 and even 11, 12-year-old was that I'd be sitting in a beautiful garden and over the wall would come my prince and he would take me by the hand and we'd go up and he would take me to his castle where we would have a wonderful family and lots of children. Not that I had any idea how any of that stuff happened, but that was my dream. And here I was becoming older and older and knowing that my life had been prescribed for me. And when I was 14, I, along with the other oldest girls, became a postulant. And a postulant is the first degree of becoming a religious person in a convent, a nun. And at the very same time that I was becoming a postulant, which means I was going to leave the world and be a nun for the rest of my life, I was starting to develop crushes on the men or the young men in the organization. I had no idea why. I didn't know what a crush meant. All I knew was that suddenly I was persona non grata. I was an evil woman or evil young lady, but I had no control over it. I just suddenly was fascinated by someone. But that was a step too far. And that was when Sister Catherine decided, she was the woman that ran the whole place, that she needed to get rid of me. And we were schooled within our school. And the moment I graduated from high school, and I had done very, very well in school, I was gone. My siblings didn't know I was going to be gone. My parents were informed. And when days later people saw, where is she? And they went to Sister Catherine to ask where I was. The response she gave them was that I, 17-year-old, completely naive young woman, was destroying the vocations of the men. Those were the words she used to describe why I was no longer there, which was pretty threatening. And I'm sure it didn't mean a lot to the young ones. And I'm sure to the older ones, I'm sure it was evident that I had crushes. So there I was. I had already been accepted to 2 colleges, one of which was Vassar, and one was Bates, where my father had gone. But Sister Catherine had done that purely so that they could get the school accredited. And so she used the fact that I was a very good student to have me take the exams and get into college. And then when I got accepted, she told me I would lose my soul if I went to those colleges. And therefore I had to write a letter saying I would not be going. So when she kicked me out at the age of 17, where was I supposed to go? And she allowed as how she would put me through a course in secretarial skills. So typing, which now children do at the age of 7 practically, but typing and shorthand, the things that were done that way. And the moment I got that certificate, I was on my own completely. And I had to find a room, which I did at the YWCA, which was safe. And I was, from then on, a working woman. I would put myself through college, and it took 9 years, but I was on my own after that.
So remarkable story. And for people listening or watching, we won't have time to go into everything because there's other things that we want to cover. But we've got your books that we can put in the show notes so people can access them. And obviously, there's more content on the internet. Potentially, we'll go into more depth around some of this stuff. And maybe we can have another conversation at some point as well. But it's remarkable story so far. When something that springs to mind. So before we hit the record button, you said to me, we had a lovely conversation. And one of the things you said to me was that because you'd been part of this group where you coexisted together, so you had no relationship with the outside world. So when you entered the outside world, you couldn't really understand what other people were talking because everybody talks in slang. Maybe you want to give everybody a little bit of insight into what that was like as a 17-year-old having to literally find your own way, literally overnight, and having to communicate with people where it wasn't clear what people were saying.
It was like I was thrown into a foreign country. But also from a cultural standpoint, I knew nothing. I did not know the name of a single Hollywood actor or actress. I did not know a single baseball player, football player. I was just devoid of any context of social society. And there I am in a school with hundreds of girls my age, all of whom are far more fashionable than I. And the language, they spoke 14 times faster than I did. So I could barely get the words, hear the words. And then the words they used, as I said, were Greek to me because they were full of slang, which I had never heard a word of in my life, as well as different swear words. And I used to put those words in my mind and then go to a dictionary. And we had a few dictionaries there because if you're typing, you want to make sure you are spelling correctly. And I would look them up. And half the time I couldn't even find the words in the dictionary because they weren't there. And there was no such thing as an urban dictionary at that time. And a story I didn't tell you, which I hope will be okay to say here, is there was one word in particular that everybody used all the time. I had no idea what it meant. I could not find it in a dictionary. I hope it will be okay to use on your show. And so I thought, I've got to find out what this word means. And I didn't know whom to ask. So I looked at the girls very carefully. And I chose a girl whom I had spoken to and liked. She was very sweet, but she was not rough around the edges at all. She was very nicely mannered. I could tell she was Irish. I figured she was Catholic. She'd probably gone to parochial school and therefore, would be a little more like me. And so one Friday afternoon, I just thought, okay, I've just got to get this out of my system and ask her what this word means. So I said to her, it was a Friday afternoon, I said, could you help me with something? She said, sure. I said, could you tell me what shit means? And she just looked at me and she said, shit. I froze and then I said, that's it. I turned, I said, have a nice weekend. I left the building. I made a beeline for the bus where I was going to head back home. And I said, that's it. I'm never, ever, ever again in my whole life going to ask anyone a question about anything I don't know. And that experience has stayed with me all my life. That was how naive I was. And after that, I just had my ears open, my eyes open, and my mouth very closed as I tried to put it all together on my own.
It must have been terrifying to work how you were going to function when you'd been around this community and it was so closed off, and then you were into this almost like space where there were lots of people, different, people maybe talking about things that, because you mentioned that you didn't know the sports star, you didn't know the actresses,
Right.
You didn't know cinema, you probably had no political, very limited knowledge of what was going on politically. So there's all these things going on. When you're at college, I'm just thinking back to my days at college, You're getting people from different parts of the country, different parts of your state coming together. And invariably, people are saying, what's your story? Where are you from? What was your relationship with those situations? How did you respond when maybe fellow students were asking you those types of questions?
Well, it was one of the reasons I did as little as I could to engage in real social engagement because I was terrified. And in the Boston area, everybody knew who Father Feeney was. And the press referred to us as Feeneyites. And that was a very derogatory term. So the last thing I wanted to do was to be asked where I was from. And, I would kind of make things up. Oh, Cambridge, because that's where, it was very close by. If I started, the minute I talked, I knew I was in trouble. And so I made a huge effort not to find myself being asked those questions. And for that very reason, I made very, very few engagements, social engagements with people for probably the first 8 or 9 months. But I did have some skills. I had been educated very classically, but very, very well. And I knew that I could speak language better than most people. We had been, grilled in grammar, and I could write. And so I knew inside myself that I had skills, and this was, the hand I was dealt, and I had to take that hand and make the most of it. And what I first wanted to do was simply survive. And I did that by being very quiet, by hearing and absorbing and slowly becoming more comfortable with engaging with other people. But once I got my feet on the ground, I became quite adept at having conversations that made it sound as though I knew a lot more than I did. Okay. But I would get turns of phrase and things like that. And it was a very worrying time for me. And I think some of it I've almost blocked out in my mind because I remember just that feeling in the pit of my stomach, oh, I have to go in front of a crowd or part of a crowd. So I actually kind of loved those crazy Friday nights where there would be a loud, music going very, very loudly. And I would go, okay, so nobody can hear me and I can't hear them. So I can learn to dance and I can do all these kinds of things, but I don't have to answer any questions. And that was the way I was for several years.
So I've got 2 questions that spring to mind, if I can ask these. So one's going back a little bit, but I'm just keen, just in my head, so I'm keen to ask you it. So your experience was a very unusual one, most people, but probably listening to this or watching will probably testify to that. Did you ever think to yourself when you were going through this process, particularly as you were getting a little bit older, getting into your sort of latter part of your teenage years and to the point where you were asked to leave, did you ever think about why me? How am I going to cope with this? Did you have those, I guess, feelings of why am I in this situation?
I used to lie in the fields sometimes and say things to myself like, are we the only 39 children in the entire world who are being raised this way? I would think that a lot. And I knew back then there were like a 1.5 billion people in the world. And I just wondered, maybe there was some other place where there were 39 more children and they were all being raised like us. But I also knew that I didn't control anything to do with my own life. Everything was directed for me. I also knew it was my home and I loved it. I loved my home. I loved my family that was there, even if I wasn't allowed to talk to them. So when Sister Catherine was telling me that I had to leave, it was devastating. I knew no one outside. I didn't want to leave. I almost would think to myself, what can I do to stay? On the other hand, all my energies were always trying to find out what the outside world was about, what it was doing. So I had this tearing because I knew no one outside the world and I was afraid of it. But in a way, Sister Catherine did me a huge favor by kicking me out when she did, making me, at first I learned to survive, and then I was able to start to learn to thrive.
Okay. So an interesting point that you made there. which you kind of over the years people hear about cults and stuff like that from TV. They come, we hear about them in the UK, in the States, different parts of the world. But you said a second ago that you kind of loved it was your home and you loved it. So what was interesting to me is that although it's very unusual to me and most people that haven't existed in that type of environment, that they created an environment where you actually loved it. Would you think that most of your, I was going to say siblings, or most of the other 39 kids had a similar relationship with it, where they did consider it their home and there were, I guess, fun times there?
Oh, there were lots of fun times, lots and lots and lots of fun times. And I learned so much. But all that being said, I think there was one very important connection that I had that a lot of the other families did not have. And I was the oldest of 5 children, and my father broke the rules. Now, let's remember, we weren't allowed to talk, parents and children were not, but everybody was assigned a responsibility. And once we moved out to the country from Cambridge, we became really, really monastic. And in another interesting insight into the fact that this really was morphing into a cult, Sister Catherine made sure that the people who were very highly intellectual had completely non-intellectual jobs. So my father, who had his master's in philosophy and could teach mathematics, he was assigned to repair the cars. But to me, as a 9-year-old, when that was all happening, I didn't think, oh, poor Daddy. We couldn't even call him Daddy. He was Brother James Aloysius to me, and my mother was Sister Elizabeth Ann. I didn't think, oh, I feel so badly for him. In fact, I was extremely happy because we had 2 houses, and all day long you had to go between the 2 houses. Your schooling was in one, and you slept in one, and then you had to go for your meals and to mass and to, all of that kind of thing. So back and forth and back and forth. And the place where the cars were fixed was right in between the two buildings. So all day long I could just see him, and we couldn't say anything. But if he was under the hood of the car, he would simply look up at me, and he would just take his little finger and go like that. And he did that with my siblings, all of them. And that to me gave me such immense happiness. And I knew he loved me. I was completely convinced that he loved me. And as I got older, I never blamed my parents for what happened. I always felt that it was Father Feeney and Sister Catherine who tore them apart from me. Now, maybe I was overly perceptive as a child. I spent all my time with my eyes open, looking and analyzing and thinking about why people did different things. And I think for me, it was a very, very encouraging sign to always have my father there. We didn't celebrate birthdays, but every year on my birthday and I on his, we would find each other and just whisper. And he would say, "Happy birthday, my little sweetheart." And my little princess, my little princess. He called all 4 of his daughters my little princess, right till he was 90 when he died. That was always his name for us. And just to hear that, "Happy birthday, my little princess," it was like the glue that held me together till some 3 or 4 months later. Once every 3 or 4 months, we were allowed as families to sit together and talk for 45 minutes. And even during those sessions where my littler siblings would sit on my parents' laps and they were always talking to each other, and all I could do was think, oh no, we only have 20 minutes left. We only have 10 minutes left. We only have 5 minutes left. And then that big bell would come. And that was the end for another 3 or 4 months.
Crazy to hear that. So we're going to get into the corporate side of things in a second, because you've had this, I mentioned this amazing corporate career, and then you pivoted away from that. So, but again, we don't have enough time to cover anything like what we would like to cover because there's so much. But I was just thinking around later life with maybe your siblings and your parents. Were you able ever to have maybe a conversation together about how unusual
our situation
was, and maybe we would have loved to have been more of a family?
Well, we did have discussions, and I think we were one of 12 families, and I think some of the discussions in other families turned into much more argumentative. And why did you do this to us? And that was never really the situation in our family. And I think it's because we always had such a great sense of love emanating from our parents. Everybody was supposed to be separated, not to care about their familial relationships. Interestingly, Sister Catherine herself had a husband and two children, and she would go home to stay with them 3 times a week. So typical. But I think it was, I mean, we did talk about it, but it was never in an angry way. And I really felt that they wished they were not in that position. But when they left, so I was kicked out in 1966, and by 71, our whole family was together again. But in 69, my father left with one of my brothers, my brother and one of my sisters. And then 2 years later, the other 2 sisters came out. My mother had started really paying a lot of attention to me, even almost from the beginning. I didn't always want it because I was learning about the world and she was still in a nun's garb. And I needed to explore and find out about the world. But there were never any really harsh words, ever. I did talk to them. My mother told me once, and my mother read my entire first book. My father, it wasn't until I was 55 years old that I decided I wanted to write that book. And my father they were both supportive, wonderfully supportive. My father died when I was 60 and started writing it, and he was 90. But my mother read the whole first book, and she said, parts of it make me sad, but she said, it's all true and you need to publish it. So it was great. There was no protection on their part, though I do dedicate the book to them for always letting me know that they loved me.
Yeah. That's Little Sister.
That book is called Little Sister.
Okay, yeah. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes for people to get access to that so they can order that and read that. So I mentioned in the bio that you've had this wonderful corporate career. So tell me about that pivot, how that happened. And it's a million miles away. So your corporate career and all the things that you've done is a million miles away from the person that you were leading up to a 17-year-old. How did that all come about?
Well, as I said earlier, I knew what I had to do was survive. And for me, surviving was in its own way thriving at that point. And when I finished the secretarial school, it was up to me to find a job. And the first proper job, I taught typing for a little while, and it was so unintellectually interesting. And the first proper job I had, I went to an agency in Boston with my credentials, which were how fast I could type and how fast I could take shorthand. And they said, we have 2 opportunities for you. And the first one is with a brokerage firm in downtown Boston. So I went there and I met the partner, 2 partners, and we had about a 20-minute conversation. And all of a sudden, the head partner said, well, we'd like you to start. Would you like, and we will pay you $90 a week. And could you start tomorrow? And I thought, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. I said, yes. So I started the next day as a receptionist. I wasn't exactly sure what a receptionist did, but I knew I had to answer the phone. And there were lots of brokers. And I was so excited about having that job. I said, this is my new life. Everything that's happened in the past is gone. I don't have to think about it anymore. I now have a brand new start to my life. This is the first page of my life. And all I wanted to do was be the best receptionist in the entire world. And that meant Xeroxing things for people and going across the street and getting all the brokers their lunches when they wanted it. And pretty soon I was cutting out articles when I knew that one broker liked a particular stock. And, you have these ribbons of tape that were always about. So I would just go and look for, whatever stock they might be interested, Eastman Kodak or RCA or whatever. And after 6 months, I got called into the partner's office. And George Burden, the partner, said, we are very, very pleased with your work. And we're going to give you a raise from $90 a week to $100 a week. And I'm standing there, and I was pretty good at math. And I went, wow, that's an 11% increase. And then I went, but it's twice that because it's happened in 6 months. So I thought that's a 22% increase. Well, they must think I'm doing well. 2 months later, it was Christmas time. And he called me in and he said, this is the time of year when we give out bonuses. I thought, bonuses? Nobody ever told me a receptionist got a bonus. And he gave me a check for $1,500.
Wow.
Now, My salary for the whole year was only $4,500. And that was when I started investing in stocks. And from there, there were ups and downs, and there are some pretty horrible stories and things that happened to me. But from there, I then became the secretary to one of the men that wasn't a broker. He was a research analyst. And I learned so much. And then I wanted to get out of Boston, because all I was thinking is I want to really do much more, but everybody's going to say, oh, I knew her when she was the receptionist. So all I wanted to do was get out. And my best friend in the world, a woman who I never told my story to until she read my book 5 years ago, but she was my best girlfriend. She was offered a job in Philadelphia. And she said to me, will you come with me? I said, yes, just like that. I was 23 years old. I didn't have a job in Philadelphia, but I didn't care. And that's what you should be like when you're 23. You know, the world is there, and, you know, chase your dreams. So I went there for 2 years. And by the time I left there, I had almost had my degree. I was going at nights to Boston University. And when I moved to Philadelphia, my advisor at Boston University said, take every course you can at Wharton and at the University of Pennsylvania. We'll accept every one of them. So after 2 years of doing that, I was just about finished with my degree. And those 2 years, I became a statistician. I was taking all these courses at night, and I was working for men, but I had 6 men actually. And I had said to them in my interview, I want you to promise me something. When I'm crunching these numbers for you, I want to learn about the industries. Will you answer my questions when I have them? And they all said they would, and they all did. So I was able, and I was following the airline stocks, the trucking stocks, the insurance companies, the lodging industry. And over a 2-year period, I got to see exactly how they worked. And by the time I moved back to Boston, I was an analyst. And then I came to New York. And I mean, throughout this period, I had one wonderful man in Philadelphia that was a mentor to me. And then when I went back to Boston, it was tough. The inflation was bad. The markets were in the tank. Corporate profits were terrible. Interest rates were through the roof. And I finally got a job that summer up in Boston. It was 1974. And there couldn't have been a more difficult time. And 2 months after I got the job, I heard 2 people talking at the water fountain. And I heard one of them saying that we were being taken over. So I immediately made a beeline into the head of the firm. And I said, are we being bought out? And he said, yes, we are. So I immediately thought, that's not very good. I've only been here for 2 months. So I said to him, is it last in, first out? He said, I'm afraid so. So there I knew I was about to lose my job again. And this tear came down my face. And this guy who was gruffer than anyone, and he had a spittoon in his office. He chewed tobacco and he would spit. And I mean, but he was amazing. And he said to me, please don't cry. You'll make me cry. And I never heard that. He just seemed to me to be like kind of guy. So I was back in my office, and about an hour later, he came in and he said, I cannot get you a job, but I can get you an interview. Go down to New York tomorrow at 10 o'clock and meet this firm. What I had not realized was that prior to running this small company, he had been the director of research at Fidelity, the largest investment house. So he knew every single firm that did research, whether they were good or bad. And he had sent me down for this interview. I was offered the job. I was so excited. The next morning, I got up very early, went into his office. He was there, of course. And I said, I was offered the job. And I had a big smile on my face. I think he already knew, because I think those people had called him. But I said to him, I'm so excited. On the other hand, I'm torn. I just moved back from Philadelphia to Boston. My family's all here. I can't decide what to do. Of course, I didn't have a job. So what was I really going to do? And he just looked me in the eye and he said, do you want to make it big in this world? And I said, yes, of course. He said, go to New York. And I did. And that, for 2 months, that man was my mentor. And what an important impact he had on my life. So for me, there's such good reason that I have dedicated this book, my second one, Breaking Glass, to my mentors and to mentors in the world. And you probably want me to explain why the subtitle is Tales from the Witch of Wall
Yeah,
Street.
absolutely.
So I am now 75. 5 years ago, I was having my 70th birthday, and a woman got up there with a microphone to tell the audience how she knew me. And she had been a salesperson at a big brokerage firm, Bear Stearns. And she told me that her boss had called her in. This was about 1985. So we're talking 95. I mean, we're talking about, 30 years earlier. And she said her boss called her in and said, listen, we have this very big account at Citibank, and a woman there runs most of the money. But I've put all these different men on the account, and they're all afraid of her. And he said, I want you to see if you can have a nice relationship with her, because we really need to keep this account. And she said, the woman was telling the audience at my birthday party, she said, well, I had heard of the woman, but I'd never met her. And all I knew was that when they went down to the trading floor, the guys on the trading desk called her the Witch of Wall Street. That was the first time I ever heard it. I was 70 years old. I was horrified. I thought, oh my God, what, me? The Witch of Wall Street? Now, there was no doubt I broke some china along the way. But, on Wall Street, it was a dog-eat-dog world. And I just had to get the best performance for my clients, et cetera, et cetera. And I was responsible for a lot of money. And so, I worried about that for days and days. And then when I was writing this book, I thought about it a lot more, and some things clarified themselves to me. There are certain traits, which if a man has them, such as being aggressive or impatient or attention to detail, it's like these are leadership qualities. This is just what we need. And somehow, sometimes, when they are displayed by a woman, she just gets called the Witch of Wall Street. And when I saw that, and I accepted it, you can't change the world. People have preconceived ideas about things. People expect certain behavior from some people and expect different behavior from others. I decided to embrace it. I decided I was okay with it. I wasn't any different from a lot of other people. And so I decided to, as I say, embrace it and make it my badge of honor. So I am the Witch of Wall Street.
What a journey. It's a remarkable journey to think about the start of your life as a child and being asked to leave your home and then having this phenomenal career. Did you enjoy your career on Wall Street?
I did very, very, very much. However, there came a point. So I mentioned to you earlier that I got married in my late 30s and found myself at the age of 40 really wanting to have children. My husband had 3 children of his own who were, kind of teenagers and going into college at that time. And so it took a few years to be successful, but I had twins at the age of 45. And I remember when I was on my 3 months maternity leave telling myself, okay, stop. No more climbing the corporate ladder. You've got another wonderful set of responsibilities for yourself, and take joy in that. And I did. And I did for a while. And then after a while, I couldn't resist. I thought, well, I've got this down now. I've got a good marriage, I've got a good career, and I've got the children. It's all working together. So why can't I do a little more and a little more and a little more? And then my children were 5 years old. And I always had in the back of my mind, regretting that I wasn't being brought up by my own parents. And I thought, I do not want my children to be brought up by nannies. When they're little and it's play dates, it's okay. And one summer, the children were 5, and we were all at the beach, and I was on conference calls all day. And my husband came home with the children and said, we're in the water swimming, and you're on conference calls. This is not a vacation for you. And I realized he was right. And the following week, it was a long holiday weekend. I went in on Tuesday, and I said, I'm retiring. And I'll give you till the end of the year, and then I'll be gone. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I knew my husband was right. I knew I wanted to raise my children, and I knew I couldn't do everything at a breakneck speed. And so I stopped. And there I was, January 1st, happy as anyone. But I kept my business hat on by making sure that I didn't give up. I didn't become, invisible. I had been on television a lot with regard to the market. So Squawk Box would call me up and I would say, yes, I can come in. And I did that for months and months and months afterwards. And I didn't say that. I mean, everybody knew I was no longer, with my firm, but I was still investing, and I was investing. I was investing my own money, and I was giving advice to people. So it was very important. And then I got a call one day, and a woman said, "I watch you on television all the time," and she said, "You do a nice job. I think you'd make a great expert witness." And I wasn't quite sure what an expert witness did, other than see them on television in spy movies or murder movies. And the next thing I knew, I had another career. And for 20 years, I did expert witness work. And for 20 years, I also went on corporate boards. But that career still allowed me to do what I really wanted to do, was take the time to raise my children. So I feel very, very lucky in that. And, I think even today, now I'm 75, and I have aged off, if that's the right word, some of the boards. And I'm thinking, now what am I going to do? I need another career. And I'm energetic. My children are now 30 years old. They're, definitely flown the coop. They have their own careers. And so for me, I'm trying to think, and now I do a lot of giving back. I'm a mentor to a lot of young women, mostly. I sit on not-for-profit boards. And I think that part of giving back is very important for me also.
Yeah, you've got so much to offer. Just into meeting you today and learning about you for this conversation, and your journey is a remarkable one. So any number of people can learn, be inspired from you, and I'm intrigued to learn what your next pivot will be, because I think maybe we're in it now. There's another pivot there, because when you talked about when you left the corporate career, you decided to focus on your family, and you kind of had to work out what you were going to do. I immediately went back to when you were 17, when you left your home and you having to work things out. You're going to college, but you were still having to work out how am I going to do this, because I've got no experience of being around anybody apart from your community, apart from your family. So I'm excited for the next chapter.
Well, I don't know what the next chapter will be, but I do know that giving back is very important, advising people. I was mentored, and I love to tell young people, whether they still be in high school or college or in their early careers, seek out mentors. Seek out mentors. They will help you. A good mentor. There's only a good mentor. There's no such thing as a bad mentor. A bad mentor is not a mentor. And young people should be unafraid. Not everyone will be a mentor. Not everybody is interested. Not everybody has that instinct. But for those who do, you will be blessed by being open with them, asking them questions. Ask them questions you think might be idiotic. They aren't idiotic. There is no question that is idiotic.
Okay.
So, and one of the other things I've done, I started 8 years ago. I started a healthcare company for the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
And for me, that's huge. I'm the CEO, but I'm the pro bono CEO. And I have learned so much. And I know that there are people who are Catholic that feel as though that is not the right thing for me to do as a Catholic. And I just compare myself in a small way to Mother Teresa. And I said, well, I'll never reach her heights. But if I can just do a tiny bit that helps people on the margin, that's how I should spend the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Even though I'm tempted to want to have my own show or a podcast.
I think you should. Maybe we can talk about that after. But I think 100% you should be doing something like that. You've got so much to offer, and like I've only just met you, but I just am really immersed in your journey and just getting the snippet of your journey, but also the valuable knowledge that you have. So yeah, definitely your show, a podcast, 100%, that should be something you look at. Can I just go back to mentors as well? So for people
Yes.
that are thinking, actually, I would like to maybe find or source a mentor. And there's you can have a good mentor or you can have a mentor that isn't good, which is essentially isn't a mentor. How do they identify a good mentor? Is it an intuitive thing?
I think, frankly, it's a trial and error thing because you don't know. You may ask someone a question and they give you a shrug. Well,
Okay.
find someone else. And I did have some people whom I worked for, and I was working as hard as I could to do the best job possible. And it was one guy in particular. He just never seemed to get into the relationship part. I wanted to learn more from him. And so if he doesn't, you can't arm twist them. It's not their instinct. It's not their grace, frankly.
Yeah.
So for me, I was able to find them plenty of places. And I think there are a lot more people who are really good and want to be of value to you than you might think. And it may take a little bit of, a little gumption on your part to go, okay, I'm going to ask for help. But once you've done that, and once someone has helped you, it becomes a lot easier.
I was talking to somebody today actually about asking, because sometimes we don't want to ask because we feel embarrassed or maybe our ego doesn't want to let us ask, but there's asking is a superpower when we develop that. Because even if somebody says, look, I can't help you, Paul, or I just don't know, at least I know that. If you don't ask, then you leave this potentially there's this world of opportunity that could be there that we will never find out about.
Exactly.
So we were just talking about that, getting into the habit of just asking politely.
Well, I think that asking is rewarding. In college, I think a lot of kids go in a little afraid to build a relationship. And once they do, it becomes self-fulfilling. And if somebody doesn't help you, fine, there is someone else.
Yeah,
And you
absolutely.
build up a confidence in asking for help.
Yeah.
And it's intellectual help. And there are lots of people who are willing. And, in college, it should be your professors. They should be the kind, but some people are shy. Some people don't feel comfortable. But once you get the hang of it, it's very rewarding.
So I guess for people listening and watching, if you're in a pursuit, you want to get into, I don't know, a podcasting, you want to get into the financial market, you just really see who's out there that's maybe further on down the line than where we are, and just ask them, because people are very happy, believe it or not, to offer support and help where they can.
Absolutely. And when you're young and don't know a lot, you should have 1,000 questions. And by asking them, nobody who knows is going to think, what a stupid question.
Yeah.
If they're of any goodwill at all, they feel that by answering it, they know that by answering it, they're making you better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Patricia, I've been monopolizing your time, but I've really enjoyed monopolizing your time. So hopefully this won't be the last conversation we have. Definitely love to have more with you. So where is the best place for people to find you?
Well, I have a website, patriciachadwick.com. Very, very simple. It has a lot of information and interviews regarding my first book. I've just started the tours for my second book. So those will be coming on little by little. And, my book, I think there are links on my website for purchasing my book online. But, and I know in the UK, my book might not be quite as available. So certainly an online option is an excellent one.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be on Amazon. I'll find the links and I'll put those on the show notes so it's easy for people to access your website, and secondly, links so they can order the book. So it's very easy.
Super.
So Patricia, we have a recurring question on the podcast, and that question is, if you could invite 3 inspirational people for dinner, they can be alive or past, who might you invite?
Well, I think now that I'm 75, they're quite different from the ones I would have had when I was 25 or 35 or 55. And none of them is living now. but they are very much about what my life is all about now. And one of them is the Queen of England, whom I have always admired from the time I was really, really tiny. And you might have thought that living in a world that was cut off from what was going on outside, I would know nothing about the Queen of England. But in an interesting way, one of the things I had to do was memorize all the kings and queens of England from Edward the First on. I forgot a lot of them, but I had to, and they fit very much into the history. And of course, there was George III and there was the United States and all of that. But I also knew at the time that Prince Charles was born exactly 3 months after I was. So I thought of Queen Elizabeth and my mother as very much kind of on the same path. But over the years, I watched what an incredible woman she was, dedicated. Talk about people think the life of a queen is a luxurious life. This was a woman who worked 365 days a year for her entire life. And she always did it with a smile. And I just admired that because I am very sure I could not have done it with the same grace that she did. So she is one. And the other one is someone I mentioned. And again, this is very much a function of where I am in my life now. But Mother Teresa is a great inspiration to me. And her love and her leadership, go beyond, religions and rules and, power. She was truly dedicated. And in the work that I do for the LGBTQ community, I just hope I can do a little bit of what she did. And the third one was someone I did mention to you because he was a man that filled me with so much joy. And it was Bishop Tutu. Yeah. It was so amazing. I got to meet him. I have pictures of myself with him. And the man was so full of joy and, far more religious than I am. But religion was for him joyful. And I had the great honor of being with him in church and watching his joy and his happiness. And the man really loved to dance. And it was wonderful. And I have pictures of myself. And I think those are the ones I most want to show of me with anyone who was a celebrity. So those would be the three that I would most love.
That would be an amazing dinner.
It would be.
Oh, that would be phenomenal. I would love that to happen, clearly, as much as you probably. Phenomenal people, phenomenal dinner. There'd be lots of laughter.
Yes.
Lots of inspired and insightful conversation. Lots of listening. That would be phenomenal. That'd be phenomenal. Very easy. Patricia, it's been amazing. I've loved meeting you. I've loved learning about your journey. And hopefully, again, we've captured a fraction of your background, what you've done, but hopefully people have got good insights into your phenomenal journey. I'm looking forward to find out what that next pivot is. Maybe that can be our next conversation.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning into this episode of My Perfect Failure. We're always looking to grow the show. So please do hit the subscribe button if you are watching on YouTube. And your feedback is really welcome. So we're keen to hear about the things you like and equally the things you don't like. So you can find me at paul@myperfectfailure.com, or you can find me via the feedback page on the website. So take care for now. Bye.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.